Today discuss about the novel Absalom by the American author William Faulkner, first published in 1936, taking place before, during, and after the American Civil War. It is a story about three families of the American South, with a focus on the life of Thomas Sutton Paine. Okay. Absalom, along with the sound and the fury, helped Faulkner win the Nobel Prize in Literature for the year 1949. In 2009, a panel of judges called Absalom the best southern novel of all time. Now the plot summary is Absalom details the rise and fall of Thomas Paine, a white man born into poverty in western Virginia who moves to Mississippi with the dual aims of gaining wealth and becoming a powerful family patriarch. The story is told entirely in flashbacks, narrated mostly by Quentin Compson of his roommate at Harvard College, Shrevey, who frequently contributes his own suggestions and surmise. The narration of Rosa Coldfield and Quentin's father and grandfather are also included and reinterpreted by Shrevey and Quentin, with the total events of the story unfolding in non-chronological order and often with differing details. This results in a peeling back onion revelation of the true story of Sutpin. Rosa initially narrates the story with long digressions and a biased memory to Quentin Compson, whose grandfather was a friend of Sutpin's. Quentin's father then fills in some of the details of Quentin. Finally, Quentin relates the story of his roommate Shrevey, and in each retelling, the reader receives more details as the parties flesh out the story by adding layers. The final effect leaves the reader more certain about the attitudes and basis of the characters than about the facts of Sutpen's story. Thomas Sutpen arrives in Jefferson, Mississippi with homes, slaves, and a French architect who has been somehow forced into working for him. Sutpen obtains 100 square miles of land from a local Native American tribe and immediately begins building a large plantation called Sutpen's 100, including an ostentatious mansion. All he needs to complete his plan is a wife to bear him a few children, particularly a son, to be his heir. So he ingratiates himself with a local merchant and marries the man's daughter, Ellen Caulfield. Ellen bears Sutpen two children, a son named Henry and a daughter named Judith, both of whom are destined for tragedy. Henry goes to the University of Mississippi and meets fellow student Charles Bond, who is 10 years his senior. Henry brings Charles home for Christmas, and Charles and Judith begin a quiet romance that leads to a presumed engagement. However, Thomas Sutpen realizes that Charles Bond is his son from an earlier marriage and moves to stop the proposed union. Sutpen had worked on a plantation in the French West Indies as overseer, and after subverting a slave uprising was offered the hand of the plantation owner's daughter Eulalia, Eulalia won. She bore him a son, Charles. Sutpen did not know that Eulalia was of mixed race until after the marriage and birth of Charles, but when he discovered that he had been deceived, he renounced the marriage as void and left his wife and child, though leaving them his fortune as a part of his own moral recompense. The reader also later learns of Sutpen's childhood when young Thomas learned that society could base human worth on material worth. It is this episode that sets it into motion Thomas' plan to start a dynasty when Sutpen tells Henry that Charles is his half-brother and that Judith must not be allowed to marry him. Henry refuses to believe it, repudiates his birthright, and accompanies Charles to his home in New Orleans. They then returned to Mississippi to enlist in their University Company, joining the Confederate Army to fight in the Civil War. During the war, Henry, uh, restless with his conscience until he presumably resolved to allow the marriage of half-brother and sister. This resolution changes, however, when Sutpen reveals to Henry that Charles is part black. At the conclusion of the war, Henry enforces his father's interdiction of marriage between Charles and Judith, killing Charles at the gates to the mansion and then fleeing into self-exile. Thomas Sutpen returns from the war and begins to repair his dynasty and his home, whose 100 square miles have been reduced by carpetbaggers and punitive northern action to 1 square mile. He proposes to Rosa Coldfield, his dead wife's younger sister, and she accepts. However, Sutpen insults Rosa by demanding that she bear him a son before the wedding takes place, prompting her to leave Sutpen's 100. Okay. Sutpen then begins an affair with Millie, the 15-year-old granddaughter of Was Jones, a squatter who lives on the Sutpen property. The affair continues until Millie becomes pregnant and gives birth to a daughter. Sutpen is terribly disappointed because the last hope of repairing his Sutpen dynasty rested on Millie giving birth to a son. Sutpen cast Millie and the child aside, telling them that they are not worthy of sleeping in the stables with his horse, who had just shed a mare. Enraged, Was Jones kills Thomas, Millie's newborn daughter, and finally himself by resisting arrest. The story of Thomas Sutpen's legacy ends with Quentin taking Rosa back to the seemingly abandoned Sutpen's 100 plantation, where they find Henry Sutpen and Cletty Clytemnestra or Clytie, the daughter of Thomas Hudson by a slave woman. Okay. Henry has returned to the estate to die. 3 months later, when Rosa returns with medical help for Henry, Clytie mistakes them for law enforcement and starts a fire that consumes the plantation and kills Henry and herself. The only remaining Sutpen in is Jim Bond, Charles Bond's black grandson, a young man with severe mental handicaps who remains on Sutpen's 100. Thanks for watching. So that is the story all about Absalom.